So what is it?
I'm the Doctor.
So what is it?
I'm the Doctor.
So what is it?
I'm the Doctor.
Only joking.
I'm the Doctor.
So what is it?
I'm the Doctor.
So what is it?
I'm the Doctor.
Only joking.
I'm the Doctor.
So what is it?
Small off-duty Czechoslovakian traffic warden.
So what is it?
I'm the Doctor.
Only joking.
I'm the Doctor.
So what is it?
I'm the Doctor.
All right, dudes, it's time for another episode of It's Time to Rewind. I am known as Bubbawheat, not the Bubbawheat, not first name Bubba, last name Wheat, just Bubbawheat. This season is Red Who, where I'm covering British sci-fi like Red Dwarf and Doctor Who, and joining me 3 million years in the future via the TARDIS are my guests, Toni and Joe from the Watchathon of Rassilon. How are you guys doing today?
Doing good.
Good.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. I've really been enjoying the dichotomy of this season, I guess, because I'm much more familiar with Red Dwarf and Doctor Who. I'm not brand new, but I'm relatively new to, and all my guests so far have been very deep into Doctor Who lore, and so that's been very interesting switching back and forth between these two roles. And this week we are back to Doctor Who, and we are talking about Carnival of Monsters, which is the second serial of the 10th season of classic Doctor Who, featuring the Third Doctor John Pertwee. It originally aired in 4 parts starting on January 27th, 1973. But before we jump into today's serial, I would like to know, what are your guys' history with Doctor Who? Like, when did you first start? Like, when did you first discover the Doctor, I guess?
Well, I think we both discovered it before we started dating, right?
Yeah, actually, so
Separately.
we just covered like the episode that was airing in our podcast, the episode that was airing when I got into Doctor Who, which I believe was like the Satan's Pit.
Satan's Pit, yeah. The 10th Doctor era.
10th Doctor era. I went back and I watched all of 9 and like got caught up, but that is when I started watching the show. And it's largely because of just being on the internet and being in forums and other people talking about. We both, I think, were in a lot of forums with a lot of people who were UK based.
I was on a Douglas Adams forum, and he's heavily tied in with Doctor Who, so that's part of it. I was a little different. You started New Who. When I heard about Doctor Who, and I'm the type of nerd that I am, I was like, I'm going to start from the very beginning. So I watched, I think, most, if not all, of William Hartnell before, and then we started dating, and you were like, you got to jump up to the new stuff. And
well, we were together, like, we'd be hanging out, and like a new episode would drop, and he'd be like, "That's spoilers," and I'm like, I can't. First of all, it's in no way connected to the William Hartnell era. Please just watch it with me, or else I'm just gonna leave and watch it because this is important.
So I eventually jumped forward and we watched all of New Who. And then after we got married, we decided to do a podcast because I was like, I still want to watch all of Old Who, and I convinced Toni to do it with me. So we did a podcast where we watched all of Doctor Who from the very beginning, which we've done. We've watched all
through
of
Classic
Who. We're currently in New Who, which we've already seen that. So, but now we've seen all televised too. So
That's true.
yeah.
Nice. I'm still, I'm trying to get back to my New Who first watch, I guess. I've never, I always forget if there's any sort of, because I know rewatch for a show that you've already seen, but I don't really know, or I always forget if there's like a good name for doing a first watch of a show, but like not a binge, because I'm doing it in, a slower pace, but, doing a first time watch of an old show.
I don't know if there's a term for that.
You got to come up with one right now. Go.
Blitzel I don't know. I panicked.
Never mind. I put too much on you.
I just got to the Andrew Garfield episode of of New Who, the one with the Empire State Building.
Oh yes, not a great one, but if I remember, he has a not great American accent in that one, but he gets better when he does Spider-Man. So
You got to start somewhere.
yeah,
Yeah, I was wondering about that. I thought it was funny. It's like, oh yeah, he's New York in here, uh, and then he's Spider-Man, and then I was like, wait, now I forget, is Andrew Garfield British?
yep.
I know Tom Holland is,
It's
but I
like they
couldn't
gotta
remember.
cast British people as Spider-Man, and then redheads as redheads as
Redheads
Gwen
as
Stacy,
Gwen.
and blondes as Mary Jane. They just get it all mixed up.
Yeah, although technically, Emma Stone is a natural blonde, but uh, she looks so good as a redhead that she kind of stays that way semi-permanently. That's like
It
her
was
default
definitely
hair
odd
color.
seeing her with the blonde hair, I felt like. So
Yeah. But we are, let's go ahead and jump back to Doctor Who. This, this is the third Doctor. We're into John Pertwee, and I think I messaged you over Instagram before we started, but and I know I don't have a whole lot to compare it to in terms of classic Who, but of the three episodes, I think this is by far my favorite of the three serials that I've covered
what
so
were the
far.
first two you did again?
The Time Meddler with Hartnell and the Tomb of the Cybermen with Troughton.
I mean, Carnival of Monsters is a particularly good episode for this era too.
Yeah, because I would say I prefer the first and second Doctor to Pertwee, but this serial is definitely better than those two serials. So
Yeah, although I did enjoy the Time Meddler quite a bit, and my guest did say that Tomb of the Cybermen was kind of an odd choice. Like, I didn't do a ton of research. I just kind of had a Who friend that, well, Lackey, the first guest in this series. He's the one that helped me curate the list of episodes that I'll be covering, because he's a massive classic Who fan, especially. And I get the feeling that he chose Tomb of the Cybermen more for its importance to lore over quality of the episode.
yeah, I do tend to think it's a little overrated. It has one really great scene, which is the scene where the Doctor's talking to Victoria, and the rest of it's all right.
But this one is so much fun, and like, I don't know, I didn't really get I didn't really get that much of a sense of John Pertwee as the Doctor, because especially in this serial, his actions are very plot driven and not so much character driven. So I feel like I didn't get a ton of personality from him. Although it does always remind me, like his son Sean Pertwee, because I watched Gotham and Alfred was my favorite character in the first couple seasons of Gotham.
I will say there is one scene that when we were watching it, I was like, that's very Third Doctor. Like, this is something that only the Third Doctor could do, and that's just the
fight scene.
The fight scene, yeah.
He's like, let's do some fisticuffs.
He takes off his jacket and he has like the big ruffle on front, and he's like, I'm gonna punch the shit out of somebody.
Yeah,
that's very, if you're trying to get a vibe for what the Third Doctor is like, that's the most in this episode right there.
Yeah,
I also got the
karate Doctor.
I also got the impression that the reason that, like, he was doing that stance because it was era appropriate fighting.
Yes.
And I did love that. He was definitely going into 1920s style boxing. It's like, it's I'm not gonna like kung fu him or modern box him, but he's a 20s boxer, so I gotta even the playing field. So it's 20s boxing on 20s boxing.
Yeah, I think that the vibe of 3 in general is he's kind of the James Bond Doctor. He kind of brings in all the gadgets and the fighting, and he's also kind of a little bit full of himself. That's
a little bit?
Yeah, maybe a lot.
A lot of it.
That tends to be why he's like not at the top of the list of my favorite Doctors, is because he is kind of
arrogant,
maybe a little misogynistic. He kind of talks down to his companions a lot. I do really like Joe, but Joe was kind of brought in to he had a companion before who was very smart and intelligent, and apparently the creative team was like, nah, he needs somebody dumb that he can explain the plot to. And so they brought in Joe, which is not a great way to bring in a companion, but I do really like Joe. I do think she gets to do more than just have the plot explained to her eventually.
Which is funny because in this episode, there's a bit of what I assume is reverse dialogue of Joe figures something out and tells the doctor that he's a genius, and he says, "Am I?"
Yeah. Yeah, they play a little bit with that arrogance in this serial. So
yeah, I love the moments here whenever they get locked in the captain's quarters the first time, and the doctor can't open the lock because it's not electronic. And Joe's like, well, what if you had like a skeleton key? He's like, I don't have a skeleton key. And then she just pulls out this key ring.
Yeah, she has a degree in escapology, I believe, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I like Joe as
I
well.
remembered at all. She just has skeleton keys on her at all times.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I thought that was great. And I liked, this is a time loop podcast, and this episode was chosen because there is a time loop in here. And I thought it was fun, even though it didn't really add anything to the plot. I don't think. It was just kind of there for comic relief, kind of, and just to help explain why, or I think it just helped to minimize the plot of those three characters on the ship, because they keep forgetting, so that way they don't have to be developed as actual characters, because they just keep repeating the same things over and over again.
God,
and so
never
that
thought
becomes a
about
comedy
that.
moment.
It's just a writing shortcut so they don't have to rewrite their scenes and write new scenes for them every time. I've never thought about it like that. It's not got nothing to do with anything. It's purely practical.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think if you take it from a story point, you could also say it's to keep them sort of tame, so that they don't go, like, if I was stuck on a boat for like in a zoo, I would lose my mind. But
but you just made that up.
Yeah,
You just made that up just now.
So, but yeah, because they just keep getting their brain rewiped, they don't have to they're not going to try to figure out the mystery. They're not going to try to escape. They just live in that moment.
I do like the way that it resets too, is just that they reset. Like there's that moment where they're talking to them and they just reset mid conversation, and they're like the doctor and Joe are still standing there, and they're like, "Oh, where did you come from?" Because it's not like a time loop, so nothing else resets, so they're just standing in a different place, okay, back to the beginning.
Yeah, and I also think that it is because this serial feels very plot heavy. There's so many plots going on at the same time, but I feel like they all work and flow together really well. I think the only weak point is the monsters, the Drashigs.
I love the Drashigs.
I love a puppet though.
Yeah.
I mean, I do love them in a way that every time they popped on screen, they made me laugh.
Yeah, if you get really into Doctor Who, you're gonna have to deal with
That's
that
the
kind
thing.
of thing a
It
lot.
doesn't even the Drashig doesn't even crack the top 20 of horrible, embarrassing monsters. It's not made of
Not
bubble
even in
wrap
the
or anything.
third Doctor era. Yeah.
But I really liked, all the different plots going on at once. We have the three gray guys. They have their own little plot, and then you have the Carnival Barker and his assistants that have the mini scope, and then we have the adventures of the Doctor inside the machine with then dealing with the people in the ship going through the time loop and having to deal with them being captured every other episode. And just
What
like, here
really
we go again.
gets me is that first episode. I mean, it takes until episode 2 until you realize how those two things connect at all.
Yeah.
So that first episode, you're just cutting in between, you know, Sherna and Vorg, the carnival people, trying to show their scope. I mean, they don't even say that it's a scope yet, I don't think.
Yeah.
Trying, like, dealing with these 3 gray people and then cutting back to that to the doctor on a boat. And you're like, why? Why are we cutting between these two things? How are they related? And it's not until episode 2 that it's like, oh, okay, they are actually all in the same place.
Although I did figure it out pretty quickly.
Yeah.
That's you know, the connection before it was revealed. It's like, oh, I bet they're inside, like they're part of this this thing that he's talking about.
That is a
And
great
then-
cliffhanger, though. Just the giant hand picking up the TARDIS. That's a good cliffhanger.
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't get good cliffhangers. Sometimes it's just, oh no, the
The
floor.
floor.
And you're like, what?
Yeah, I thought this had pretty good ones, although I did like see at least one of them coming. It's like they were talking about the Drashics so much, and then I think was it whenever the Drashik like crashed into the mechanism of the ship, wasn't that a cliffhanger?
I think so. I don't
I don't
remember.
remember.
I remember one of them is the doctor passing out. When he like
It's so tiny.
Yeah.
He comes
Yeah,
out of
whenever
the
he
scope
escapes.
and he's tiny, and Sherna screams like she saw a mouse.
Yeah, I think the cliffhanger for the second episode was definitely involved the Drashics, and I was like watching the episode, and I do watch these like I do give these episodes in this serial era room to breathe, so I only do like one episode a day.
nice.
How
Which
smart.
which I think is definitely the best way to watch these serials. I think they
Oh,
work
I
better that
agree.
way.
Tony is giving me side eye so hard right now.
Because we watched them, we would sit down and watch 4 episodes.
Yeah. We did the Daleks Master Plan in like 2 days.
In
and
2
that's
days.
like 12, 13
And
episodes.
it was horrible. It's not how it was meant to be watched at all.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I think the other reason that you know, going back to why I chose the Tomb of the Cybermen was, I think the other serials that were suggested to me were like 7 or 8 episodes, and I'm like, I think I'll go with the 4-episode one.
Yeah.
I would have recommended what's it called? The Land of Fiction one.
I don't remember.
Yeah, I can't believe I'm blanking on it. There's one that's a 4-parter, but it's actually
The Mind
all the
Robber?
episodes. Yeah, the Mind Robber. The episodes are shorter than normal length episodes, so it's a 4-parter, but it's technically the shortest serial, and it's really good. So that's the one I generally recommend from the Second Doctor era.
Interesting. I like, I was watching the episode and they were setting up the Drashics so much. I was like, oh, this is definitely going to be the cliffhanger. And then the Drashic popped up, and then the credits, and it's like, yep, I called it.
The only thing I would maybe change about this serial is I do wish we actually saw more monsters. I kind of wish they had caused more chaos and got out of the scope, and because we only really get the Drashic that comes out at the end.
The scope also drives me insane.
Yeah, I know.
It's a terrible business model, and I'll never stop talking about it. You have miniature monsters
And you gotta
inside
watch
a
'em.
machine, and you're like, that's what's going on in there.
You don't actually get to look at them in person.
Show me the tiny monsters. Show me all the cool scale stuff.
hmm And you don't even, and it's like, why not just put a webcam somewhere?
You're going through so much trouble for so little result. It doesn't make any sense.
Like trail cams. Well, the ship. Oh, I guess we don't really get to see too much. Like we only get to see him. He does like turn up the aggression dial the one time, and he's like, oh, he can't leave it on too long because they end up damaging each other.
The livestock, as he calls them at one point.
Yeah, but I love those two, and I love the interaction. Like Vorg and Sherna, they are like Sherna is so underrated in this episode, that she is fantastic. Like I love
Yes.
her being like the kind of put upon assistant that technically knows more than Vorg.
Yeah, and Vorg doesn't care enough.
About anything.
Yeah. Tony and I desperately want to cosplay them at some point. Their outfits are
It would
amazing.
take so much puff paint.
Yeah.
Puff paint like you wouldn't believe.
Can't find a clear plastic bowler hat anywhere either.
I do really like, I mean, so you're cutting in between inside the scope and outside of the scope. And I do really like that outside of the scope you have Sherna and Vorg, and then what are they have names, the gray guys.
Like,
Alec, Orem, and Pleatrak.
yes,
And what are they?
gray.
But I think
They're like the representatives of this planet,
I know,
basically.
do we know the name of that planet?
I don't remember, but it's led by
Interminor.
Zarb.
Zarb. It's what?
Yeah, for Interminor.
Interminor. So
Yeah, the only reason I remember is because I have the Wikipedia page open in front of me.
appreciate it. I really think like Interminor and the Interminor people and Sherna and Vorg interacting is like if you pit two different comedy groups against each other. They're like the comic relief from two completely different episodes of Doctor Who, and you're like, actually, they're just gonna fight for the B plot.
Yeah, but they're so great. I mean, it works so well because they are two like totally separate modes of comedy. It's like the gray guys are kind of the straight men, but they're also bumbling and kind of stupid in one way. And then Vorg and Sherna are stupid and bumbling in a completely different way.
Yeah, like Sherna and Vorg are like stupid and bumbling in like a big, broad comedy way, whereas they're more like officious and stuffy and like in a political satire almost. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love that they do have this whole like political plot with Calic coming up with this plan to like try to overthrow the president. And just using this and they have this whole thing where they sabotage the Eradicator. And I love their name, like their naming of everything. Like the Eradicator is their weapon, and they shoot it at the mini scope at one point, and it just kind of heats things up a little bit because it's so shielded, apparently.
Yeah, they're trying like that one guy is trying to discredit like all of their stuff to like have the people lose their faith in President Zarb or whatever, so he can take over. That guy, the guy who's trying to cause some chaos, he actually goes on to play a very important Doctor Who character. He's the first person to play Davros, the creator of the Daleks. So, and that's not the only person who becomes an important character later on. The guy on the ship, Edwards, who's like going on the walk with the woman, they have that slight romance going on. He later becomes a fourth Doctor companion named Harry Sullivan. So, and also writes a lot of Doctor Who novelizations. The actor does, yeah. So they reuse actors like crazy in Doctor Who.
Well, they only have so many in England.
Yeah, the UK is very small. There's only so many people.
You got to be on Doctor Who and Harry Potter. You gotta.
Yeah, I also read that the woman on the ship, she was in consideration for Joe, but the showrunners liked her so much that they said even though that they weren't casting her as Joe, they promised her a role later down the line, and it ended up being this one.
Oh,
I think
nice.
both her and Sherna were both in consideration for Joe.
I
Both
could
of
see
them.
that.
Yeah.
God, but Sherna and Vorg are just such great characters. I'm obsessed with them.
They are definitely, I think, the highlight of the serial.
Yeah, absolutely. Even though you got the Keystone Cops, the great Keystone Cops going on, and I do love how Vorg ends up saving the day, jumping to the end, or Sherna just happens to find the part that was taken out of the Eradicator, and Vorg sees it, and he immediately knows what it is, and and then suddenly he gets this backstory that makes him so much more interesting about being part of the Laser Corps or whatever it was, where it kind of made me. I almost thought that it was kind of like a future version of like Flags, um, or like the I don't know what they call it, but uh, whenever they're twirling around the wooden rifles.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It
The thing from the end of Stripes.
I don't know why, but especially with him doing that kind of made me think that it was that, except for the fact that he put it into the Eradicator, and he did end up killing 2 Drashics on his own.
He took his own sweet time about it, though. Like, I love that scene where he's like working on it, and he just kind of stops to tell a story, and Sherna's like, "Hey, we're doing a thing here."
Yeah, and then whenever he finally pulls the phase 2 switch to basically reset everything in the mini scope back to their own timelines, and re-embiggen the Doctor and Joe outside. The Doctor, whenever he wakes up, he's like, "You're cutting it awfully close there," or he's like, "You took your sweet time."
It's like when right before he does it, he's like, "Oh, it won't work," and he's like, "Oh no, wait, I just got to push it down a little more." He gave up so
He gave up
quickly.
like 5 times too. He's like, "Nah, it's too late. They're already dead." Sherna's like, "Are you maybe try though?" "Nah, switch won't go down all the way. That's broken." Like, tried very hard not to do it.
I also I don't remember it because the ending goes by so quickly, but I couldn't tell for sure if Khalik got killed by the Drashig or not.
Oh yeah, I'm not sure. It kind of looked like he did. Like there's that shot where he kind of gets like dragged away, but I'm not sure. Like when the Drashig is attacking, he kind of slides around a bit. The framing's a little tight.
Yeah, that kind of felt like that was what they were going for, because they do kind of set it up where his little sidekick Orem is like, one might be worried that one would get uh, um, attacked by the Drashics themselves or oneselves. I also love how they all talked in the third person with the one, one might do this.
They're a great. The guy who wrote this, his name's Robert Holmes. He writes some of the best Doctor Who, and he's always got like really tight plots, but also pretty much every time has at least one comedic duo.
That's it. I was having a really hard time not saying comedic duo because there are 3 of the group.
Yeah, there's 3 aliens. So like he's got a comedic trio, which is different.
It was actually
Sherna and Vorg.
No, it's Sherna and Vorg and the Grey People together. That's the
that's
comedic
the duo.
Yes.
Okay, that makes sense.
It's like it's almost like Vorg and Sherna is one duo, Khalik and Orem is another duo, and then the 3 gray guys and Vorg and Sherna is another duo, and then you have Khalik Orem against Pletrak, because he's kind of the not on board with the 2 Khalik and Orem, the 2 gray guys. They're kind of in together, and they're kind of in opposition with Pletrak. So it's like you have all these character dynamics between these 5 characters, and on top of that you also have I forget what they call them, but like the minions of the gray guys.
Oh yeah,
they have a very practical name, like
I don't remember it, but their masks are terrible.
Operators or
yeah,
I think they were operators.
I can't tell if that's supposed to be their face or if that's supposed to be a mask. And if it is supposed to be their face, there's definitely a shot where a guy is like trying to fix his mask very clearly in shot.
I think
it's got like his finger in his nose.
But I do hate them. They're unsettling.
Yes.
They look like they're just melted.
They ran out of budget is what happened because they had to put 50 billion sequins on.
And all the
Borg.
budget went to just Borg's suit.
It's just a spray painted. It's just lunch meat spray painted gray.
Another little fun, because I know too much useless knowledge. This is also the only serial for the Third Doctor that has the Cybermen in it, even though it's only in that one little shot where you can see that he has a Cyberman in his miniscope. That's the only time in the Third Doctor run. Like I think the John Pertwee comes back for the Five Doctors and there's Cybermen in that, I think. Yes. So he does get to interact with them eventually, but not in his original run. And some Doctor Who fans just lose their minds over that kind of stuff.
Some, not referencing yourself at all.
Nope. You got every Doctor has to have a Dalek episode, a Cyberman episode, and a Brig episode. Though the first Doctor doesn't really get a Brigadier episode because that was before the Brigadier was around.
Before
So,
his time.
yeah.
Oh yeah. I only just saw my first episode with the Brigadier because funnily enough, starting this season, instead of going right back into my New Who watch, I started in on Sarah Jane Adventures.
Oh yeah, I like Sarah Jane Adventures. It's good.
And so I switched back to New Who after finishing the second season of that, and the Brigadier shows up in that series season finale.
Yeah, you just missed Brigadier in the Third Doctor era because he was in I'm pretty sure literally every single serial of the Third Doctor before that. Because the Third Doctor is grounded. He's
Earthbound.
He's earthbound. His TARDIS is basically broke for like the first 2 seasons, I think. And this is the first serial in which his TARDIS is up and running again.
Which is
the first
why
place
it's so delightful that Joe spends so much of it just harassing him about not being able to fly it. Like admitting you don't know how to fly this thing. He doesn't.
And I think
He
it's funny that
absolutely
it is like kind of a triple misdirect on that, because the Doctor thinks that he was supposed to go to the blue planet, and then Joe's like, no, you messed up. We're on Earth in the 20s. And he's like, no, that can't be right. But then he ends up still being wrong because he's on Interminor instead of the blue planet. But he was right because he was not on Earth. He was in outer space.
Metebelis 3. He keeps trying to go to that planet and keeps missing.
Really?
Yeah, he finally gets to it in Planet of the Spiders, which is the Third Doctor's last serial. It's a little bit of a running gag. Yeah, I also just love that when she's like, no, we're on Earth. And he's like, couldn't be Earth. And she's like, there's chickens. He's like,
you don't know that they're chickens.
You don't know
Maybe
they're
they're
chickens.
people.
He tries talking.
Maybe they're the intelligent life.
He says hello to the chickens.
I do also love the set for the inner workings of the
Oh my
miniscope.
God.
Like that just looks like a fun playground, honestly.
I'm obsessed with that set. This is like one of my, so I really like anytime Doctor Who does scale stuff. I like anytime somebody gets real small, but then everything else is real big. It's a bummer to me that so much of, like, in theory they're small, but those things are never in the same place. That's one of my like problems with this episode. That set is so cool.
Yeah.
I love that set. And it really does feel like the inside of something that you're not supposed to be. Like, it doesn't, I don't know.
The
it
only
just
thing
reads
that's missing
like how it's
is
supposed to.
the only thing that's missing is there were no moving parts. But other than that, I thought it looked fantastic. Which I understand that on the classic Who budgets that would not be cost effective.
Yeah,
But
there would be a guy moving. Like, that's how doors open and stuff. It's just,
Yeah. They still do that.
there's somebody off screen and they open it.
yeah, I mean that's how they did it in Star Trek for ages.
But sometimes it's just what you got to do. Gotta do what you can with the money you have. Literally, there is a Fourth Doctor serial where the monster is just bubble wrap. So
And then, I think that's really about all I have to say. I think maybe we should circle back around just a little bit to the time loop, just
Yeah.
because this is
Oh, yeah.
the time loop podcast, and like again, like I like how it works and how it's done. Although I am one thing that it didn't seem like I wasn't clear on was there's not a sense of how long they've actually been trapped in this time loop, and also the fact I think it's kind of insane to think because the time loop itself, it feels like they reset after like just 1 hour, which that seems insane to me for them to have just this 1 hour time loop.
Terrifying.
That
yeah. Are they under eating or overeating? That's what I want to know.
yeah,
actually
I
a
was
great
wondering
question.
if they like were also kind of trapped in time in some way, so that way they like even though it didn't affect the Doctor or Joe whenever they were in there, because it does seem to be, just specific to the living creatures that were intentionally put in the mini scope. But I wonder if maybe there is like an actual time loop, especially because the woman like struggled so hard to remember. And like Joe was trying so hard to get her to remember. And I do like at the end of that, we have this moment whenever they're put back into 1926, and she has this moment where you think she's going to remember, but then she's just like, oh no, it must be nothing, never mind.
I also like he's like, man, I feel like I've been reading this book forever.
I don't think there's any time element whatsoever, which is almost more upsetting. That like their minds are just resetting.
Maybe their bodies are resetting a little bit too, so they
I
don't.
think like have they been aging this whole time?
Mhm.
If it's
Yeah.
not a time loop and they're just resetting, are they getting like older and older
Right.
and not but like reliving the same hour over and over again without realizing that they're getting older?
Mhm.
Because the guy, the dad must have, his liver must be failing at this point, because the only thing that he eats or drinks is the scotch or brandy or whatever it is.
Yeah.
That's true. Their bodies have to reset or else that guy would be sloshed.
Does the drink reset?
See how much of it is a time element. But then there are times where they're like they reach the end of their loop, but they're in a different place.
Yeah.
And they just go back to be like they just forget what they were doing. It's not like a time loop where they reset back in space.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna be thinking about this. This is gonna bother me.
It's,
Also,
But
because
yeah.
you said when we were watching it and like they finally get back in time, you're like, they're so much older than they think they are.
mhm.
It's like, yeah, how old are they? How long have they been
Yeah, and we don't
in the
even
scope for?
and like we don't even know. Yeah, we don't know how long they've been in the scope, and like because like even Vorg doesn't know because Vorg won it in a bet.
Yeah.
So I do love that ending with the where he's just conning the remaining gray guy.
Well, and that's
Yeah.
what's so fantastic too about this comedy duo. These two groups as the duo is that like you do have this like high pretentious, dumb in a way where they think they're smarter than they are, and then like the very broad like showman, and just like this guy's like, oh, this planet is perfect. Because all of these people think they're so freaking clever. I'm gonna make bank here.
Yeah, and I love that it ends with the Doctor and Joe going back to the TARDIS, and like for a moment she's worried about Vorg and Shurna, and the Doctor sees him conning the guy out of his credit bars, and he just ends with, I think they're gonna be just fine.
I do think back to the time loop. I don't know if I've ever really seen a time loop like this before. And then there's also like little added elements of like this is what'll happen if I turn up the aggression a little bit. it's almost like you can experiment on them a little bit, have them repeat a thing, but then
Yeah,
like,
it's
what if I
not
add a new
stuck.
element? Yeah.
They're resetting to a blank state, but it's not like they're living through predetermined things, which is what most time loops are. Everything's going to happen the way it's going to happen.
Right.
It's weird in that things are happening over and over again, but it's flexible.
Yeah.
Mhm. Like they still kind of have free will,
Yeah.
but they're they're not, their actions aren't predetermined, but because of their personality, they are they're more inclined to follow the same routine because that's how they would normally behave.
Mm-hmm. It's an interesting concept.
Yeah, I do think it's interesting, and I definitely think that it's worth mentioning, and I'm glad that it exists and that I could cover it. But uh, my I don't think it would have lent itself to the way that I normally cover time loops, which I do one loop at a time. So it'd be harder to break this episode down into each individual time loop and then
Right.
all the other stuff.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, I think this was a great episode, and I didn't think that I would be like ranking the serials as I'm going through, but at this point, I think it is pretty clear that this has been my favorite, followed by the Time Meddler, and then Tomb of the Cybermen is at the bottom of the three right now.
That's
that tracks.
very reasonable. Yeah.
But thank you guys so much for joining me. This was a fun episode, a fun conversation. And why don't you take a moment and let people know where they can find you and your work online?
Sure.
We are the Watchathon of Rassilon. You can find us, anywhere you find podcasts. Our website is watchyourrassilon.com. We also have a linktree/Watchathon, where you can find all of our podcast, our Patreon, all that good stuff. You should go listen to our episode on Carnival of Monsters, where we figure out what our C rank is.
You said you listened to the episode. Oh, what a C rank?
Everybody has a C rank. You can be captain of the Crunch.
Okay.
I'm a C documentarian.
Okay.
You're just a landlubber.
That tracks. That feels right.
Bubbawheat, what would your C rank be? I'm putting you on the spot.
I don't know. It's tough because I'm not. My instinct is to go like improv, but I can't. I'm horrible at thinking of something funny on the spot.
Well, I'll finish up our plugs and give you a little bit of time.
You have until the end of Joe's plugs.
So we're going through all the Doctor Who in order. We've done all of Classic Who. We're currently in the 10th Doctor.
We were in the 10th Doctor while the 14th Doctor was airing, and that was fun and weird.
And I want to mention a couple of other things that I've got. I've got mintypineapple.com, which is my personal website. And if you like time travel stuff, I got a time travel comic book called Time that's on sale on my website. I did a movie review series called The Projectionist Project, in which I've done Triangle and Primer and what was the other one I did? Men in Black 3. So I've done a lot of time travel movies on this movie review podcast, or not podcast. There's a YouTube series. So check all those out on mintypineapple.com.
Triangle is fantastic. I covered that on
so good
on this season, on the earlier season here, and yeah, I love that movie.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
And of course, you can find, Dan, I guess to answer your question, I would say, even though I'm not super religious, I would go with the Ship's Chaplain.
Ooh,
okay, nice.
That's good. That's a good one.
All right. And of course, I am Bubbawheat, and you can find me on all social media where I'm at Bubbawheat. At the moment, I've actually kind of restarted being active on Threads. So you can find me on Threads. You can also, I still have the accounts on all the other social media. So if you find at Bubbawheat on whatever social media you happen to be on. Send me a message. I will most likely get the notification. And as long as you're saying something nice, I will reply to you. And and we also have a Facebook group. It's Time to Rewind, a time loop group, and you can join that to discuss episodes as they come out. We can also discuss upcoming and current time loop movies, video games, TV episodes. All that is welcome there. We'd love to have you and help join the conversation, share memes and stuff. And until next time, smoke me a kipper and I'll regenerate before breakfast next week.